Hello everyone. Welcome to the webinar Go Contactless, Keep Your Drivers and Passengers Safe. My name is Ucha Hribernik and I'm the head of mobility at LIT Transit, a global transit technology provider. We are really thrilled to have you on board. Please place comfortably and grab yourself a big cup of coffee or tea and let's get started. Let us embark on a journey of contactless ticketing. And our first stop is LIT Transit. LIT Transit is a global technology solutions provider to public transport authorities and operators. Its advantage is that it, on one hand, provides world-class technology to the cities with the best city transport in the world, such as Singapore and Hong Kong, and on the other hand, supports also operations in countries with less organized traffic patterns, such as Nigeria, Mexico, and India. LIT's mission is to help you reimagine your public transport. With this intention in mind, we also organized this webinar to give you answers that you might be seeking for. So, how agencies are adapting to COVID-19 around the world? Why transit agencies should speed up their digital ticketing implementation plans? How will you improve the rider experience while boosting your bottom line? Why contactless payments will ready you for future mobility and multimodal travel? What can you do to implement and benefit from contactless payment more rapidly? Today, we will stop in the world's fastest growing economy, India, then rapidly adapting UK, and always innovative Dubai, where we will visit 3 senior industry experts who will share their experience and views on contactless ticketing. The first one is NILAYA VARMA, co-founder of Primus Partners India, a boutique management consultancy in India. As senior executive, NILAYA has led more than 20 key national and international assignments across sectors like digital strategy, mobility, infrastructure, and smart cities, and has worked in advising clients in more than 30 countries. The second guest is Mike Burden, director of Burden Consulting Ltd, a consultancy specialized in automatic fare collection and road user charging markets. Mike has worked on projects in Europe, Asia, and America, and has advised clients on a range of subjects, including developing technology strategy for intelligent transport systems, developing technology solutions for electronic toll collection, and automatic fare collection systems. He has also evaluated several multi-million-pound contracts for government organizations. Our third speaker is I proudly present to you Melvin Andrews Joseph, Strategic Solutions Director, Merchant Sales and Acquiring at Visa. Visa has helped launch over 60 contactless transit projects in 2019 and is currently working on over 180 projects globally. We will hear more about it later. Melvin has over 13 years of experience in the payment space across Central Europe, Middle East, and Africa. So you might be asking why contactless and why now? A recent study showed that current coronavirus can persist for up to 3 days on surfaces like metal, glass, or plastic. So, what that means for our transit systems? If we take a closer look at the passenger journey, many transit systems still require a ticket purchase from either a firebox, a ticketing vending machine, or any kind of other point of sale. In many cases, a passenger also needs to use an ATM to withdraw money or POS terminal to type in the PIN. Now imagine that those surfaces are touched by all users of your public transit. That is hundreds of transactions and hundreds of opportunities to spread coronavirus. Also, money is a disease transmitter. And as much as some countries try to take the money laundering to the next level, most of the countries just leave the cash to circulate. And that is what actually scares people. There was a 50% drop in cash use in the UK alone. If we check the graphs on the right side, the upper one showing us Google search interest through time for cash and corona-related search queries, we can see a tremendous increase in March and beginning of April. On the other hand, the lower graphic shows the increase of search queries for contactless payments that keeps rising and gaining people's trust. Already in survey from June 2019, UK Finance reports that 45% of passengers would feel more positively towards public transport if contactless was introduced. So, I bet some of you don't bother too much with Corona. It will go away anyway. And on the other hand, I want to present you actually the solution that will make that is solution to the problem that I mentioned. And this is Lead Ticket. Lead Ticket is a flexible yet robust platform for contactless ticketing. It supports various fare media and channels such as mobile ticketing, CEMV, and also smart cards. It not only keeps your drivers and passengers safe, but it also enables you as a transit agency to keep track of your revenues, merchants, and devices that are part of your ticketing network. So I bet many of you don't bother too much with Corona. It will go away anyway sooner or later. So why shall you be changing your current ticketing system for the contactless? So contactless ticketing enables your passenger 50% faster boarding times compared to putting the exact change to the fare box. It will reduce your cost of cash handling. So digital fares are 3.5 less costly than physical fares. You will be able to reduce cost of ticket management and infrastructure by limiting or canceling certain points of sales. And a very important factor, you would make your public transit a compelling experience for your passengers. Speed and easy attract passengers to use contactless. So, and Visa survey of 100 cities actually showed that 61% of citizens are at least interested, if not very interested, to use contactless services in public transit. With contactless also new new incentive schemes can be added to your public transit. For example, the mayor of London introduced Hops Fare, 1 hour of seamless travel around the city for £1.5. It started in 2016 with 80,000 hops per day, and it now reached already 450,000 hops per day. So a great increase in relatively short time. And then contactless brings also new segments of customers to you, such as young people that are actually already very into instant experience and digital experience. And on the other hand, also tourists who are mostly unfamiliar with foreign ticketing systems. Least but not least, contactless will also bring you more revenues and consequently profits to the table. So businesses that started accepting digital payments usually see an average revenue increase of 70%. And now let me introduce you the agenda for today. All our journey guides will first give us a short introduction on their contactless ticketing initiatives and best practices, and then we will deep dive into a panel discussion. In the end, there will be some time for your questions. So now I would ask NILAYA actually to give us a presentation about the ticketing systems in India.
Thanks,
NILAYA, go ahead.
Thank you so much. Looking at the pictures, I wonder whether it's COVID that has aged us in the last 2 weeks so much, but nice to look at a picture that looks 20 years younger. But coming to just a quick overview of what's happening in India, and I'll just share the. I'm just trying to share the screen. I hope it works. It should. I hope we can say it. But just very quickly, if I was to just lay out the canvas of how contactless mobility is happening in India. I mean, in India, one thing that we do need to recognize is anything that is multiplied by 1.3 billion people is always going to be large. And that's true for how everything looks in India. We have a very large bus service, transportation services. Interesting thing is that about only the share of public sector bus companies in India is very, very small compared to the larger number of buses that we have. It's actually less than 10%. But you still have about 150,000 buses, which do about 25 billion people ridership every year. So when, Ursa, you talk about Corona, living in times of Corona, that gives you the perspective of how important contactless becomes. We also have a significant growth in the metro projects, and which have traditionally a lead as far as contactless ticketing is concerned. While we do expect some amount of challenges to these numbers in the initial time or over the next 2-3 months as we reopen in India, the reality is the socioeconomic circumstances of India means the transportation requirements is going to continue. Social distancing, if I can say, for most Indians is a flexibility that doesn't exist because of how we live, the kind of cities that we have, how we travel. So really, this becomes important in the context of transportation in India. In India, everything coexists at the same time. So if I just look at the entire picture of just the Mumbai metropolitan region, you would have fare box collections happening at the same time as we are moving into open loop systems as well. You have just within the Mumbai metropolitan region, we've got 6 to 7 bus operators or transport systems. We've got various urban local bodies or city administration. You've got multiple metro lines. So all of them have been using very different systems, but the reality is, while all levels coexist at the same time, we have seen a significant push in the last few years to reach as what we're calling the level 5. And the reason lies clearly in what it offers, but also around how some of the development is taking place. And this is just an example of how progress is happening. As I mentioned, there are a large number of metro programs and metro projects that is happening in India with many functional projects. And we see that open loop systems are becoming more and more prevalent. Those are the programs that are being driven, and there's a clear movement toward open loop system. At the same time, we do have many implementations which are closed loop, and as I said, level 0 to level 5 exist at the same time, but clear progression across India to contactless mobility. And one of the reasons, or one of the initiative that was also taken almost a year back, which is what we call the National Common Mobility Card, which was an attempt to create a single platform, interoperable platform that can help integrate the ticketing as well as payment system. And we did have a pilot project in India. I think in wake of COVID-19, this initiative is going to get a push. It's also something that the government had come up last year with a certain set of guidelines and a direction. But I think you will see a much more initiative coming in this, because end of the day, again, giving the example of Mumbai, we've got so many entities, and without a national common mobility card, it just becomes very difficult, or at least a regional card, it just becomes very difficult to drive to drive any ticketing and a payment system. And that's one of the reasons we see a huge potential in India for contactless travel. Let me just end by making a very simple point, and this is linked to COVID-19. I think we have seen many examples in India post the lockdown. In fact, we are still in the process of coming out of the lockdown in Bangalore, which is down south, Silicon Valley in India. There are people who are moving in saying that we don't want to use daily, want to avoid contact, and therefore looking at daily, weekly, and monthly passes as opposed to buying daily tickets. I think there is a number of young startups in India which are coming with innovative solutions, especially based on mobility, based on a mobile platform, and we see that spurring a move towards contactless mobility. And finally, there are specific initiatives that have been announced by state governments as well as central government, which is going to drive that. So overall, Ursa, my belief is the direction was already there. COVID-19 is going to push that direction very, very fast. Funnily enough, most people would realize Indians love their cash. I've never seen Indians avoid touching cash in wake of COVID-19 ever before, and I think that's going to continue.
Great, thank you, Nilaya. Very insightful. Very insightful, and we will talk more about India's smart ticketing initiatives in the next in the discussion. And now I would give the word to Mike. Mike, can you please present us your experience in ticketing?
Okay, just unmute myself and that'll be better. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, and we can see the presentation very well. So.
Okay, right. I just want to put thanks, Ursula, for inviting me to be part of this seminar and to share some of my experiences in this area. As you can see, this is a slide with a lot of logos of organisations I've been lucky enough to work with and help in their introduction of smart ticketing solutions and toll collection systems, which is the main area that I work in, as you said. So I won't dwell on this. You can have a look at that afterwards yourselves. Oh, why can't I change slides? Okay, right, good. So I think what I want to talk about, I just want to get a bit more generic, perhaps, in terms of talk about and try and understand what it is that what problems a fare collection system is trying to solve. Some of the things that we see people wanting to do is to improve customer experience. Now, whether that's making it easier to buy a ticket or to travel, it ranges, it covers that full spectrum. But also in this current environment of COVID-19, there's perhaps less need to interact with a driver if you're using a totally contactless solution, which you tap in and tap out. That makes that easier for the driver, more secure, less interaction. Also with the use of mobile devices, you have your own device which you control, and you can you don't need to let that go anywhere else. Whereas a card can get if you're issuing a card from an entity or handing it in to get recharged, reloaded, there's potential for transmission across that because it goes outside of your control. So the whole fare collection around cards and mobile using contactless EMV is quite an interesting space. Other things you wanted to do to drive revenues, deliver mobility as a service, as mobility is starting to change, especially in this current climate where we're seeing vast reduce in car travel because obviously everyone's had to go into lockdown, but we're seeing great improvement in air quality. And countries that are starting to come out of lockdown are looking at ways in which they can maintain some of these gains that they've had in terms of improved air quality by trying to move people across to different forms of mobility. Public transport is struggling, of course, because the capacity of buses has decreased to something like 11. You can get on a bus now with social distancing. So there needs to be a way worked out in the fullness of time how that can operate nearer to normal. But I think there'll still be some social distancing necessary over the coming months. So that will be evolved over time. Quite a few other things there that people want to do. Obviously, reducing some of the operational costs, reducing fraud, and as you can see on the diagram to the right of the screen, there's quite a range of trends appearing across the industry, with people who are looking to do things now or doing things now or looking to do them in the not too distant future. So it's a very active sector. And lots of movement, obviously led in terms of contactless EMV, obviously following rapidly behind a lot of what happened in London and learning a lot from that. We're also starting to see lots of technologies appear, because I don't think there's going to be one solution is the dominant solution. You won't have one solution in every city. Solutions that are available in a volume, lots of people moving around, contactless cards, contactless EMV, Google Pay, etc. make a lot of sense. On more longer distance journeys, it may be more barcode based, maybe on a mobile platform. When we're looking at mobility as a service, we start to see things like account-based ticketing, or just using some other form of token. And then obviously open payment in London. But a lot of people with very low-tech existing systems, or Coinbase, are starting for like TFL with things like card and others, and they want to migrate. So that migration path are going to be quite a challenge once they decide they intend to use. I think it's worth mentioning that these projects are not just technology projects. They do change within an organization, and they have a fair degree of complexity. And also, it's not just to take a solution from one location. You can't pick up the solution that's in London and drop it somewhere else, because there are too many local differences in terms of the political environment and the way public transport is organised. So there's some degree of customization that you have to do. So there's no one solution fits all, which makes these projects, although they're challenging, they are quite interesting from a delivery point of view. And I think that's all I want to say.
Great, thank you, Mike. Very insightful. And let's go now to Melvin, our third guest. Melvin, will you share the screen?
Yes, absolutely, Ursa. Thank you so much. Perfect, excellent. I think that was some great presentation from NILAYA and Mike, and I think very valid points. I think while you covered the end-to-end when it comes to urban mobility and the different types of payments, what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus obviously on just the open loop part. So, as with everything in Visa, I've got to spend a couple of minutes showing you a confidentiality notice and a forward-looking statement. Good 10 seconds. I'm pretty sure you read that word by word, so then we can move forward. So when it comes to urban mobility, I think Visa is in a very exciting time, right? We launched our first visa acceptance in public transportation back in 2010 in Malaysia. Since then, it was a bit of a break before 2014, 2015, when DFL essentially started off. But since then, it's been a rapid amount of engagements and deployments that we've seen. Like Ursa mentioned, in 2019 alone, we had 60 cities that actually went live with enabling contactless banking cards, right? As we speak right now, we have 180 plus contactless projects around the world, which we expect will go through implementation in 2020 and the next couple of years. In addition, there's over 300 different locations that's actually in the pipeline, right? And the main objective of all of this is, what we're trying to do is get the security and the convenience that our cardholders are used to and bring that into the public transportation space with the speed that is required in public transportation. And in order to facilitate this, we've done a couple of things. And I think one thing that is a main catalyst for driving contactless banking cards in public transportation is been what we call the Visa Ready for Transit program. I'm going to speak to you a little bit more in the next couple of slides, but essentially it's a program that's aimed to drive implementations and drive go-to-market. We have over 118 registered partners on that particular program, and that's growing on a monthly basis. So let's talk about what Visa has actually done, right? I spoke to you about the security and the convenience and trying to match the speed of closed loop cards, right? So normally when you try and authorize a Visa card, it takes anywhere between 8 to 14 seconds for you to get a response saying transaction approved. You cannot wait 8 to 14 seconds in front of a gate in London, for example. And this is where we actually try to come up with multiple frameworks aimed at reducing the amount of time that you actually need to wait in front of your gate, but also managing all the liabilities that actually can come around that. So we've got three models. I'm not going to talk about them in specific, but what I am going to speak about is the two models, which is known fare and mass transit. Now, these are models that can work on what we call deferred authorization, which essentially means you can tap your card and then you can actually go through without waiting for an authorization. And what that means is you can pass through in less than half a second. The known fare is a lot more simpler to implement. It's normally used for single modes. So if you are a city which has just a bus implementation, for example, this would be the ideal mode. The mass transit is more for multimodal. It's basically, future-proofing yourself because you've essentially taken care of a lot of things. You're taking care of, majorly utilizing the account-based ticketing platform that Mike spoke about a little bit earlier as well. So in brief, multiple frameworks that's actually available to transit authorities that actually want to implement contactless banking cards. I did want to spend a couple of minutes talking about the Visa Ready for Transit program as well. I think it's going to be extremely key to a lot of the attendees on the actual webinar. Now, what we tried to do with the Visa Ready for Transit program was to try and create a platform where we could, as much as possible, try and standardize an area which otherwise is not standardized, right? So what we do with the Visa Ready program is, if you're a technology partner, we help certify you so that you have what we call the Visa Ready status. This allows you to promote the products and solutions that you have with the Visa Ready brand. And simultaneously, what we do as Visa as well is, when we engage with transit operators, we let them know that these are the different partners, vendors who've actually been certified. The Visa Ready program is meant for hardware, software, so fare collection systems, and even consultants. The main objective is to try and tap everyone in the ecosystem so that there's complete awareness of the program. We certify the solutions, pilots, and even test future innovations actually using this program. Now, the reason it's important to operators and agencies is we now have a platform which they could basically use. So if you are, let's assume, a transit authority that's looking to go open loop and you wanted to look at what are the options available, who are the vendors, you can basically go into the Visa Ready platform portal and look at who are the vendors that's been certified for this particular program. What we've also done at Visa is, identifying that the whole process from the time the transit authority decides that they want to actually go open loop to them actually going is quite lengthy, right? I've seen implementations, I think the shortest one was 6 weeks, and we've seen it going almost as long as 2 years, depending on the complexity of the implementation. What we've done is we've basically at Visa broken down the life cycle into multiple programs. It starts all the way from vision, where we're trying to figure out what the requirement is, all the way to post-launch. And what we've tried to do with this is make sure that we are with the partners and with the transit authorities throughout the entire life cycle of the implementation. We've tried to look at it from a long-term perspective. It's not one implementation and then we're done. We will be with you with the post-launch phases as well. And what we're trying to do is bring a lot of the global experience and share the knowledge that we've got over the different implementations that I spoke about. And another key component of what we're trying to do out here is also managing the multiple stakeholders, right? I think it was Mike who spoke about the fare collection systems, the PSPs. I think NILAYA spoke about that as well. So it's trying to bring all of this together. And I think Visa is in a unique position because we're in the center of that financial piece to try and help you bring all of that together. I haven't really got a lot to talk about from a COVID perspective because I think we're going to be addressing a lot of that in the discussions that we have going forward. And on that note, I think that's pretty much what I kind of want to talk to you about. Just summarizing something from one of my favorite authors. The future is already here, but it's just not very evenly distributed. I think what we have to work on is trying to get that distribution right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Melvin. Yeah, we will definitely make this distribution even. So let's start then with the discussion. Actually, I will just. Can you see the slide actually?
Not yet.
Okay, I will just share the screen. Good, so here you go. So, actually I would start with NILAYA. So NILAYA, with actually your impressive background in public and governmental affairs. So I must say that NILAYA was partner at KPMG India, managing director at Accenture and executive director at PwC. So NILAYA, how do you see the public transit ticketing has changed? Do you foresee the future of ticketing in public transit to go contactless? I mean, you already mentioned that India will definitely go in this direction, but can you elaborate a bit more on that?
Sure, Risa. I mean, you know, sometimes public transport ticketing system could look like a trivial issue. Especially when you look at trains, roads, and track, they don't necessarily change. Ticketing has evolved. And as far as future of ticketing goes, I'm pretty sure we'll converge to a point where a substantial portion of transactions will go contactless. But I also believe in most geographies, you'll also find alternate fare medias also being operational. I mean, at least in many of the developing countries. I think Melvin spoke about it. It's about 75 cities in APAC showed that about 62 of them have adopted contactless smart cards as one of the fare media. There are 20 billion devices that support contactless payments today. And what is more important, in my view, is as Melvin spoke about, there are factors that are making it the performance very, very important. And really, if you look at transportation in countries like India, developing countries, it's the ease and the customer experience which is driving ticketless or contactless, rather, an open loop system. So I believe because of the ease and the requirement that we are seeing, this is here to stay. I also believe COVID is going to push that forward. And in a simple word, yes, we see this moving forward contactless in a significant manner in the next few years.
Okay, thank you, NILAYA. And Mike, you are like a global expert in automated fare collections. Can you explain transit agencies what are the pros and cons of going contactless based on your previous experience on your past projects?
Yeah, sure. I think a lot of them have been covered already. So maybe I'll I'll try and summarize for what's been said. You know, I think one of the main ones is convenience. It's convenient for people to use something that they already have. It's easy to get if they already have a bank card. We've also talked about removing cash from the system. However, in a lot of places there are still people who want to use cash, and you need to put in place alternative methods for them to use the public transport network, because public transport is open to everyone. That's what it's all about. So you can't create any barriers to use it. So you have to balance those two out. Cost of issuance, you don't have to issue cards. This was part of the business case for TfL in their FTP project. They didn't want to issue Oyster cards anymore, and they wanted to remove that cost. If that's taken away from them, they just accept the cards. It's quite simple for people to understand. You just tap a card in, tap a card out, and the value appears on your bill later. If you arrive in a new city, you don't need to understand the fare zones. You don't need to understand the language the ticket machines are in. You can just hop on the network and travel. If you're a local traveller, you can make use, if it's your home city, you can make use of other things such as fare capping and other discounts that you can use, and you can dip in and out without having to spend money up front in terms of purchasing a season ticket. So that makes it good if you're a visitor to a city. But as I've said, not everyone's got a bank card, and so you need to find alternatives for that. If you're enforcing a contactless card like Oyster or Octopus, you can write data onto that card so an inspector can read it and say, well, was the last transaction. With a bank card, you can't write anything to the card. Except maybe in South Africa, but generally you can't write to the card. So you have to change some of your enforcement processes to determine who's travelled and with a valid, who's paid to travel, sorry, and who hasn't. They're quite complex to set up, contactless EMV networks. I'm sure Melvin will disagree perhaps with me, but there's quite a significant set of rules and data protection requirements that you have to follow. But you know, the thing is, it's been done before, and if you set out with a clear plan of what you're going to do and engage the right people to do it, then you shouldn't have a problem. But it is still quite a challenge. And also, as I said earlier, there are some differences country to country even with the payment networks, even with globally accepted brands. There are still some slight differences in the way things need to be done in each country. So you need to be cognizant of that. And as I said, you can't just take one solution from one city and drop it in another. I think that's all for now.
Great, Mike. Actually, Melvin, like Mike mentioned, yeah, that there are several differences between the implementations from city to city. As Visa had like already several successful implemented projects all over the world, could you tell us a bit what are the differences between regions, and what's the driver number one that drives the adoption of contactless ticketing? Where is also like MENA region in this sense?
Sure. So I think a couple of questions there, right? So I think just first, let's just talk about, I think just to address what Mike was kind of talking about, like the challenges. And absolutely, I think when you're trying to bring open loop ticketing or contactless banking into that ecosystem, there are multiple challenges. One of the ones that I've seen quite often is challenges that we see with PCI DSS compliant, right? So when you're talking about the other form factors, you don't need to have PCI standards, for example, enabled. And that actually brings on its own set of challenges, and that could vary across the regions, because certain regions have domestic switches, they have alternate payment methods that might be more popular than the others. So a lot of challenges when it comes to actually implementing an open loop contactless banking card in your ecosystem. Again, I'm bringing you back to Visa Ready for Transit. One of the objectives of us setting up Visa Ready for Transit was to basically look at the partners with whom we have worked, who have basically been able to do this in another area, and try and bring those partners into the regions as well. So that's one way we try and address the challenge that Mike mentioned about the hardships that you have from an implementation perspective. I think the second question was the main driver. Personally, if you ask me, I think both NILAYA and Mike kind of alluded to this as well. The main driver that we've seen when we talk to PTOs is customer experience, right? What they want to do is try and increase ridership. One of the ways to increase ridership is to give your customers as many options as possible from a payment perspective. So it's customer-centric focus that I've seen pretty much any transit authority that I'm speaking to, be it the guys who've been around for the last 50 years or be it new entities that's starting up in MENA. And that's the segue into your third question, which was around, I think it was around what's happening in MENA.
In MENA region, yeah.
Yeah, so MENA is on the right rail, no pun intended. We are having a lot of engagements in MENA at the moment. A lot more than what we had 2 years back when we originally started on this journey in the region. We have 3 transit authorities, really, the larger 3 transit authorities currently in implementation stage. There's another 6 that's actually in what we call the discovery phase. So they're trying to kind of piece together the project before they actually move forward. What I see in MENA is what I call the domino effect, right? So when you had 1 or 2 of the main transit authorities looking and then going out and saying that they are moving contactless or open loop ticketing, that's automatically had an impact on pretty much a lot of the other transit authorities as well. So in the course of 2020, 2021, like I said, we will probably have 3 cities live and then a lot more in the course of the next couple of years.
Great, and many more to come.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but now let's go a bit to COVID topic. So many agencies now either like stopped or limited fare collections. How do you have like first-hand experience how agencies are responding, and how did COVID-19 change the perception of money and tickets? NILAYA already pointed out that there will be that most probably like these trends will accelerate the contactless payments in India. How is it then elsewhere? Will this situation actually accelerate the contactless? So, NILAYA, can you elaborate on that a bit?
Yeah, Ursa, if I could just highlight one other point that you were discussing. I think Mike spoke about it. While customer experience is extremely important in offtake, I also think the cost element is important. Is another factor which will drive contactless fare media, because transit authorities are moving away from stored value cards to open this payment system, because actually the cost because the systems are already highly subsidized, the public transport systems, and the cost of such cards have gone up significantly from 7% to 9%. So I think that's also a big push towards contactless. But coming back to your point, the question that you asked, Ursa, in India, the Reserve Bank of India during the height of COVID lockdown actually took a decision to allow banks and payment providers to go contactless, and the numbers just increased quite significantly. But I think from an entire pickup, while contactless ticketing is an important element of public transport, and I think how finally it picks up is going to be a function of demography, but also how public authorities make the entire transit system safe. In a way, the industry will consolidate its technology footprints to adopt some of the digital form of contactless solution, as clearly the virus is here to stay for a longer time. I think all operators are faced with the challenge of reduced revenue in the short term. The technology investment seems demanding. However, I think these investments will now be part of the pivot basis which the commuters feel safe to travel in public transport. So I think that's something that's going to happen. But the COVID situation and how transport authorities respond to making it safe will have to go beyond just ticketing solutions.
Yeah, definitely. But do you think that investments will be more like that the public agencies will more invest now in technology, or they will rather take care of their operations and employees current?
Look, I think it's gonna be a mix of both. I don't think it can. But clearly, the technology investment is here. I've been speaking to many agencies which are talking about doing this in a much rapid manner because clients are asking for it. But it will change from a mode to mode, right? A metro may look at this very differently from what a local bus operation would look at. Intercity transport system would look at it differently from a intra-city transport. So I think it's going to vary from the kind of transport systems, but clearly it is an area of investment that's going to get prioritized.
Great, thank you. So Mike, you are also like in touch with many transit agencies. What's your perspective on this? Mike, hello?
You're mute, Mike.
Mike is gone, so maybe Melvin.
I'm on mute, sorry, I was on mute.
Ah, okay.
Talking to myself.
No
Right.
problem.
Yeah, I would agree with a lot of what NILAYA had said, but I think one of the key things that public transport authorities need to understand is what the future of travel is going to look like. As we see now, people are, you know, as part of the lockdown, people are discovering that a lot of them can work from home, so they don't need to travel. People are making a lot more use of things like Zoom. You know, until 3 months ago, we wouldn't be having this type of webinar. It wouldn't happen. We'd all have to meet somewhere. But I think, you know, this is great. So a lot of what's happening is we're looking for ways in which technology can solve some of the problems that we have and make things easier. Public transport will have a significant role to play in the future because not everyone can work from home, and there'll still need to be people traveling. We'll still need to meet face to face because we're social animals. We have to. We can't be locked away for a long time. But what that looks like in the future, we don't know. As I said before, the number of passengers you can carry on a bus has reduced now from, I don't know, in double-decker buses from about 80 down to 11. So the financial justification for public transport will need to be looked at. The frequency of buses, the number of buses, but technology has a role to play in part of that recovery and what public transport looks like. Together with you know, a sort of migration towards a mobility as a service option, as we're seeing more people looking at bicycles and scooters. How do you pay for those? And having a solid foundation of a payment infrastructure will help in deliver some of that. So I think there's a lot to think about at the minute, because I don't think when we go back it will be how it used to be. But what it looks like, I don't know yet.
Yeah, actually, nobody does actually. Melvin, what's your perspective?
Yeah, I think I agree with the gentleman. I mean, let's be clear, right? I mean, people are not going to forget or get over this whole fear of this infection anytime soon, right? Social distancing, limiting physical contact is going to be the new norm. Zoom is going to be the new norm. What we are seeing when we have discussions with transit authorities, what they're talking about is how do we get the people back, right? So talk about stringent hygiene standards, digitization, connectivity. These are the key words that we're kind of hearing, right? And if we take a step back, we have seen a massive increase in contactless payments across all segments happening at the moment, right? I was just looking at some of the numbers that we had taken over recently. Just in UAE and KSA, 60% and 85% respectively of digital payments are moving contactless. And this has been a massive acceleration in the last couple of months. Visa has very recently done this survey where we looked at consumers in UAE and KSA specifically, and we're focusing on the cashless display. So there is a massive drive towards cashless. UAE and KSA consumers specifically have said that contactless is something that they have started to adopt and embrace. And it's something that they will continue to use even post the COVID stage. So yeah, completely agree with everything that was mentioned. I think, you know, COVID has been an interesting time, but the one thing that we've seen is the massive increase in contactless transactions, regionally and globally.
Yeah, and we have actually several agencies that are listening to this webinar and are deciding to go contactless. Where shall they start? What are the steps towards fully functioning system? So, NILAYA, would you elaborate on that, please?
Sure. I think one should start from understanding the entire ecosystem as regards the end consumer, the infrastructure, and the service provider. I think they are critical in adopting the right technology. I think the 5 points I would think about when you're looking at how we should go about it, I think the details of the demography of people using public transport services. And I always try and bring in, and I think Mike made that point, no country is similar, no two cities are similar. So demography of public transport. Second, I think penetration of mobile phones and smartphone usage. In many parts of the world, the assumption that everybody has a smartphone may not be necessarily true. How many unbanked population uses public transport? Classification of income group of people using public transport, and also the existing IT infrastructure. I think all of these factors will decide the right fare media to adopt or to invest in. As operators focus in doing what they do best, which is basically enhancing the efficiency and reliability of services, I think the non-core functions like collection will move to a technology provider of account-based ticketing or open-loop system. I think in that context, standards are vital to the success of contactless ticketing application. Standards set communication requirement protocols between the card and the reader, provide a degree of interoperability to support multiple applications, including transit, bank, retail, security, building access. So I think this is a major challenge, in my view, that we need to address if we have to make a widespread implementation of contactless ticketing happen.
Okay, great. Mike, what's your first-hand experience with how transit agencies shall start actually their contactless ticketing projects? Mike, you're muted again.
We may have lost Mike. It's coming blank.
Yeah, UK lost. So maybe we should go to Dubai first and then we go back to UK.
Okay.
Melvin?
Yeah, okay.
Can you share some experience? Like, I mean, you showed us actually before already all the phases that Visa support actually transit agencies with. And I must say I was quite impressed that you even take care of the after implementation, you take care also with communication strategy and so that people adopt the technology soon and so on. Can you tell us a bit what are the steps that transit agencies should follow?
Sure. I guess when we come to the visa part of the discussion, right, it's a lot more specific. They have decided that they want to go contactless. The main question is what are the next steps and how do they go about with it? Very simply put, I would say reach out, right? The first thing is, Visa has got offices all across the globe. We've got offices in the region, be it in Dubai, Johannesburg, etc. While there is no physical meetings that happen at the moment, everyone's working. We are available to kind of help maneuver you throughout that process. So reach out to us, reach out to our financial institutions. That's the first step. But if you're looking for more information, again, I know I'm going to sound like a broken record for keeping on saying this, but the Visa Ready program. This is a program that's meant specifically for this. It is, when a transit authority, a private public transit authority decides that they actually want to enable contactless banking cards, it kind of tells them who are the people you need to be speaking to first. So I think these are the two main ways you can do. Either reach out to a Visa person directly or via the program, reach out to the different people in that ecosystem. And there's 100+ partners in that ecosystem who can kind of help you to maneuver through.
Great support. And Mike, is Mike back?
I hope so.
Great.
Right, I'll be quick then. I've not got much more to add to what my colleagues have just said. I think, I think you've got to have a clear vision of what you want to achieve. Is it just a short-term solution you're looking to implement something to replace what you currently have for some short-term gains, or is it a long-term solution that you want? Do you have plans to go to mobility as a service and you want to put some infrastructure in to look at that? Also, what problem are you trying to solve? As we talked about things, there's a whole range of things that you can do this for. What is it you're trying to solve? And what is the best solution to that problem? Is contactless the right solution for that? If not, use something else. If it is, then great, and implement it. And I think as well, as I again, sounding like a broken record, no two cities or countries are the same. There's going to be some differences, and understanding how the system works generally, but then being able to adapt it to your specific solution and your specific problem is very important. So having that understanding, talk to as many people in the market as you can, people who've done it before, talk to all the suppliers who can give you some insight into what it is that they're developing and where there've been issues before. Talk to authorities who've had issues and how they got around them and what they would do again. So, get as much information as you can.
Great. So we all know that the new technologies take some time for passengers to adapt. So what's your experience? How fast can public change their habits and go contactless? Do you think that this is just contactless is just another payment channel for younger generations, or is also something about that, and how can actually we accelerate the adoption of public? So NILAYA, go ahead.
Yeah, there's a habit is a settled tendency or a behavior that becomes automatic, right? Run at 6, coffee at 7, fore at groceries, Saturday, go to, and there's science which basically says it takes 21 to 66 days to form a new habit. Many of us have been in lockdown for I think closer to 60 days. So I think we can form a new habit. James Clear, they had a New York bestseller called Atomic Habits. He says the best way to break a bad habit is to make following it impossible, and the best way to adopting a new habit is to make it automatic. Sometimes supported by technology that makes whatever is easier to do. And I think that's really the important part. How do we make it easier to do? And coming back to the point that we have all made about customer experience. I mean, shifting to contactless payment was a direct response to the WHO's guidance. I mean, payment networks globally are doing their bit by increasing contactless payment limits in a bid to promote payments. And I think all of this is already reflected in numbers. I mean, Germany has seen contactless payment go up by from 35% to 50% of card transactions, especially once they had increased the cap. Same with many of the other firms. And there's lots and lots of research which shows that there's been a decline in cash transaction. I think one thing is certain: financial institutions, central banks, national payment infrastructure, payment service providers, merchants, all need to be ready to accelerate their digital payment agenda. I think customers want it, but it will have to be aligned to improving the checkout experience, both in-store, online, apply stronger security, and all this while you're providing better user experience. I think the post-COVID-19 period will be critical from customer loyalty, customer acquisition, and competitive standpoint for companies which drive accelerated contactless payment.
Great. Mike, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think, I think we've seen a lot of contactless uptake, and I know I lecture on a course to some MSc students in Newcastle, and one of the questions I always ask them is how many of you carry wallets around? And not very many of them do. The vast majority will have a mobile phone which they carry their entire lives on, and they will use cards, contactless cards on a mobile device, and so uptake is happening there. But I was just answering a question on here, and someone was asking it's okay for younger people who do that, but what about older people? But my response was, well, I think older people are pretty adaptable anyway.
Yeah.
And in some cases, where a lot of people get concessionary travel, for those over a particular age, get a concessionary travel card for either free or reduced travel, or as they did in London, you can make the fare on one particular form factor more favourable than another to encourage more usage. Obviously, you've got to be careful in this, that you don't want to exclude parts of society and make it more difficult and more expensive. But you can do a lot of things with the technology that makes it more beneficial for people to travel with it than if they use another form. So I think there's lots of ways to encourage that. But as we're seeing, people want to use contactless because they use it in every day. And this was one of the arguments that TfL put forward. And they said, why do I have to transfer money into transit currency just to travel on transit, whereas I use this card to buy everything every day? Why can't I just extend it and use it to travel on the underground or on the bus? And I think that logic is starting to gain some traction in a lot of places, and starting to become common. I suppose part of the challenge is in places where people don't have bank accounts, and you still have to offer an alternative for those who want to use cash, whether that's a pay-as-you-go card, a prepaid card, or whatever. Because I don't think, it might be heresy in this group, but I don't think cash will ever go away.
I lost you there, Mike.
Melvin, I think you have something to say about it.
I think, perfect points. I think Mike put on a very important point, which is, a broader thing that we hear more so in my region as well, which is about, where there's a heavy underbanked and unbanked demographic, right? And the good thing there is that's something that the financial institutions and the schemes and the government authorities are working on, right? We're working to get that payment device in the hands of those people. And there are multiple programs that we can to do that, right? So I think the latest case was in Vietnam, where we've had a prepaid co-branded card that we've done in Vietnam, which has been rolled out back in December. You had a very interesting question, Ursa, around the younger generation and the older generation. I was trying to figure out how to kind of position that. The only thing I could think of is the learning curve when it comes to using a contactless card is fairly simple. It's just tap and pay. Doesn't get simpler than that, right? When you look at the learning curve in specific. The other thing you were asking about was, I believe, the adoption and how that can be accelerated. So that's a joint effort. And I think we've been seeing, and we've been getting a lot of support from central banks and government authorities around that, right? So if you look at it from two aspects, if you look at what Visa has done, back in April 2019, Visa mandated that any new issued contactless card or acceptance device has to be contactless enabled. By 2023 April, we want all products in market to be contactless enabled, right? So that's what we're doing to drive that habit. That's what we're trying to do to drive that infrastructure. The second thing, from a government perspective, we've seen a lot of governments pushing digitization. Saudi's got the 2030 vision. A big part of that is digitization. The same with the UAE. A lot of, across the board, we've seen a lot of government initiatives that are kind of pushing this as well. And I think it's a combination of all of these factors that's going to drive contactless across different merchant segments, but obviously equally so in public and private transportation as well.
Yeah, great. Melvin, actually, you organized an exclusive event in Dubai in March, where also your customers, such as TfL, presented their experience going contactless. So you already mentioned a lot about this Visa engagement and so on. Could you actually a bit explain us how Visa is putting together this whole ecosystem, and what supports do you offer to the transit agencies?
Yeah, absolutely. So the event that you're referring to is what we call the Visa Transit Transformation event. It's one of the key pillars of our strategy at Visa, right? And this is a global event. When I say global event, the event happens in Dubai, which you attended, Ursa, in Feb. But these events happen all over, right? I mean, we've had it in Singapore, we've had it in Australia, we've had it in the US. The objectives are pretty much common across two things. Number one is education. So what we're trying to do is bring forward best practices, let people in the regions know what's happening globally, how that will work in our regions as well. You know, like I said, I think Mike alluded to the fact that every region is different, but there are certain things, certain trends that are globally there, which we can try and customize for the region. So that's what we try and do. We try and get that education across to all the partners. The second thing is building partnerships, right? Now, what we've noticed is every transit authority that we've gone to, there are so many entities that's actually involved in these implementation phases, right? Be it the hardware providers, the consultants, the AFC providers, etc. And then you bring it onto the world of payments. Now you've got banks getting involved, you've got central banks getting involved, you've got payment service providers getting involved. What we're trying to do is kind of build that partnership as well. So the other thing that happens in these events is, you know, it's an opportunity for you to kind of learn from what's happening with your neighbor. It's an opportunity for you to mingle with all of these different people, be it a gateway, be it an acquiring bank, an issuing bank, and obviously the schemes as well. So in essence, I think that's kind of what we're trying to do. We're trying as much as possible to try and bring that ecosystem together. And Visa is in a very unique position because we play right in the middle of that financial ecosystem. And we're trying to get the public, private authorities, or anyone in that urban mobility space to come into that same as well. And what we do is we'll make sure that we get you in front of the right people. We'll connect you to the right people within that ecosystem. Because at the end of the day, I think Visa's main objective is to see that you can start accepting contactless banking cards at the earliest possible. And to Mike's point, minimizing the effort and the hardships that you get when you go through those implementations.
Yeah, thank you, Melvin. It was an amazing event, and I would really recommend it to the agencies, or let's say stakeholders involved in contactless ticketing that plan to implement new contactless ticketing projects. You really can get access to global experts in the area, and also there were, for example, in this case in Dubai, there was TFL, and they shared their full cycle experience, how they actually implemented, how they actually then gain the customers, and they managed even to make almost contactless the main channel already. So now actually we go back to Mike, and Mike is also a senior associate at MobiHub, a transport consultancy that is focused on sustainable transport strategy, actually specialized on-demand responsive travel. What role does contactless ticketing play in on-demand services, Mike?
I think, you know, as I've been saying before, I think, you know, contactless payment can have a significant role to play. And, you know, perhaps one of the discussions we could have, and probably it's the topic for another webinar, is what is mobility as a service and what is on-demand management. That is, you know, that means different things to different people at different times. And understanding that is quite a challenge. But, you know, when public transport is going to be a significant part in that mix. And a lot of things that we're seeing, particularly with ride sharing, such as Uber or ride hailing, we see a lot of people travel to and from the station to interact with other modes of transport. So how do we integrate some of the payment solutions in a model with a private operator and a public operator? And so looking at the different business models is quite an active area at the minute as to how that can work, and who would take the lead. Is the public transport authority going to take the lead on that and bring it on board a mobility provider, or will a mobility provider integrate with public transport? That's still not worked out, and I think in some places different models have been tried with differing degrees of success. But I think that what needs to underpin all of this is a solid payment method, and account-based ticketing, of which contactless EMV can be part. Will have a role to play in that in the future. That you have one token to identify yourself across a network of different providers. Whether that involves subscription or whether it involves pay-as-you-go still needs to be resolved. I think what I'm trying to say is we've got all the pieces to the jigsaw, we just haven't got the picture of how to put them together yet. And I think there are different pictures that are coming to the fore, and that's being worked on. However, I think with the current environment or situation that we find ourselves in, as we come out of this, I think there will be a lot more interest in a mobility as a service type solution, and I think it will perhaps encourage a lot more activity in this space and probably speed things up. Because I was talking to some colleagues a few weeks ago, and we saw a cartoon, and I'm sure a lot of you have as well. So what's driving your digital agenda? Is it your CEO, your CFO, or COVID-19? And I think in a lot of cases it's probably the latter.
Yeah, great. And also, like related to on-demand travel is also our next webinar. Public transit to get more passengers on board with real-time information. So accurate real-time predictions of public transit are very relevant to the on-demand operators to better plan their service and make it more attractive to passengers by reducing the waiting times. So please register on the link that I will share later on in the chat if you're interested in the topic. And now actually I would ask NILAYA, like this is our last question. So NILAYA, the mobility landscape, as already Mike said, is changing very rapidly. Almost every day there are new players on the horizon. How do you see actually the role of contactless in this ecosystem?
I think looking at contactless payment across the globe, I think the COVID-19 will be driving a completely new set of payment trends that ecosystem providers will need to enable. In fact, this payment doesn't even mean you need to have a card in hand, especially in countries where card adoption isn't high or where merchants just aren't equipped. This, I think, is important. This goes for both developed countries and countries in development. I think we will see a surge in implementation for new checkout experience, especially using digital wallets such as Apple Pay and Google Pay, embedded payment systems in car, and more. I think, however, not everyone can deploy such infrastructures quickly or invest heavily when the time, especially uncertain times like now. I think with the need for speed, financial institutions should not miss out on a cost-effective payment methods that could get them the breakthrough moment, especially as our habits are changing and we could get more exposed and accustomed to new technologies. So I think the entire ecosystem is changing, and it's a great opportunity for us.
Okay, great. We still have some questions here from the audience. We will take max 2. So Melvin, when you show projects in Brazil, what cities and customers are you talking about?
So I think I've just responded to that. I think the one example that we have is Metro Rio.
Okay. Sorry,
that was the first example of a city that's gone. Yeah.
Okay, great. And I see also Mike here replied already, but maybe if you two also have an opinion on what are your thoughts on integrating mobile-based payment ecosystems such as Apple Pay, Google Pay, Samsung Pay with QR and or NFC as an alternative to an open loop bank cards?
Sorry, should I take that?
Yeah, just go for it.
So I think the first bit about, just to make sure that I understood the question correctly, I think they were talking about Apple Pay, what needs to be done additionally to enable the pays, Apple Pay, Google Pay, etc. Is that the question?
Yeah, I think.
Okay, so if that was the question, then I think in regards to, so when you implement EMV or anything NFC based, right? So you're talking about EMV specs when it comes to the acceptance, and Apple Pay, Google Pay, Samsung Pay, the different pays are based on the same. So when you've enabled open loop contactless, you've automatically catered for the different pays. Now, in regards to QR, yeah, that's a completely different form factor. You know, we've seen, like we said, we've seen coexistence of these different kind of form factors, right? But I guess my question is, you know, if you've got a scenario where you've got contactless cards enabled, where you have an open loop card available to the customer, why do you want to go down the route of QR unless there is a market requirement? So when you go into certain places in Africa, for example, you know, QR is an existing model. In that scenario, yes, it does make sense. But otherwise, I would say, you know, when you have the option of open loop, use that. But at the end of the day, it's about giving your passenger as many different payment options as possible so that he can choose what is right for him.
Yeah, definitely. Nilaya, any thoughts on that?
I completely agree. I think there has to be a business case for going back or going at QR. It's a completely different form factor. Completely agree with you, Melvin.
Mike, do you have anything to add to your comment? I saw that you already commented the question.
Yeah, you know, I agree with the guys. I mean, I don't have any more to add, I don't think, without laboring the point. So, yeah.
Okay, great. I think we are just like in the end of our lovely webinar. I would really like to thank our amazing speakers for their attendance and you, dear audience. I think we had a very pleasant journey. I really hope that you got new ideas and strategies how to introduce contactless ticketing. And just to wrap up our digital journey, I put down 3 takeaways that I find important. So Corona will definitely accelerate the contactless ticketing initiatives. It's not about technology, but rather a political and operational challenge. And ecosystems are there. You just need to go and seek for the right persons who will engage you in those ecosystems if you want to build contactless ticketing solutions from either transit agency point of view or also, let's say, other stakeholder point of view. So there were many more points actually, but we don't have time to go through all of them now. We will, after the webinar, we will prepare blogs based on the webinar and you can get it there. The recording will be available as well. Please subscribe to our newsletter to get all the relevant materials to your mailbox. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and feel free to organize a demo with us anytime. So we have helped 45 plus public transit companies. So I'm sure that we can also reimagine your public transit together. Thank you to everyone and see you at the next webinar. I will share the link now.
Thank you so much, Ursa. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, NILAYA. And thank you everyone who was on the call.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Melvin. Thank you, Mike. And
so
thank you, NILAYA.
Sorry, just one last thing. I think there was a question from a gentleman, Bashiru Raji.
Yeah, go. Sorry, maybe I skipped it.
No, that's fine. That's I think it's I don't know if this will, but I think it's a bit of an open-ended question. So if you can connect me with the gentleman, I can try and address his question because it's not a one-sentence answer to that one. Or any other questions that your teams have, you can just send it to me and I'll be able to respond to it.
Okay, great.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
We are all available actually. So if you need, if anyone from the audience needs some contacts or help, just get in touch with us. We are here for you. So thank you and have a wonderful day. Bye bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye bye.